and today we are working on a project from our Petite box, which is our newest line, and the project is the Matchbox Quilt from Moda, and we have it down here on the table as a coaster or a mug rug. And so we've got our coffee and our little bundt cake, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so the Matchbox Quilts by Moda, it's really cute. They come in this little matchbox, and there's 9 different quilts that you can collect, and you can make them all individually, or you can collect all of them and put them together as a little mini quilt. So you open up the box, and inside you have some embroidery floss for the quilting, you have some batting, and then you have a panel, and this is very cool the way they did this. It's all printed on here with the instructions. Let's see if I can get this open. So it's got a picture of the finished project, and it has a picture of all the different quilts, then the instructions, and then down here are all the pieces, and you can cut them out with scissors or a rotary cutter, and then this green strip is the binding. Then what I'm going to do with mine, and I'll show you at the end of the video, is I'm going to make a mug rug out of this piece too. It's already put together, so why not use it? So then I'll have 2 matching ones. So let's get started. So when you get this out and get ready to work on it, if you notice there's little pictures of rotary cutters on here, and it says cut out all the pieces, and there's little dotted lines, and so you just cut everything out on the dotted line. You can either use your rotary cutter and ruler, or you can actually use scissors if you'd like. And then if you go back here, it has all the written instructions and then pictures so that you can put it together step by step by step. Okay, so I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch foot, because the seam allowances for quilting are always 1/4 inch. This foot is 1/4 inch from the needle to the edge of the foot. This little foot actually has a guide on the side so that I can use that to run my fabric right up next to that guide, so I can get very accurate stitching. Now if you look at this particular foot, there are little notches here and here. Those are 1/4 and there's one in the back. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 notches there. So those are all 1/4 inch away from each other, so if you're turning corners or whatever, you can line up the different notches so that you make sure that you get everything very accurate. Then if you look at the little toes in the front, those are 1/8 inch, so if you wanted to do an 1/8 inch seam, you can actually use those as your guides as well for that. So I'm going to put this foot on and sew my pieces together. So I've cut out all my pieces and pressed them, and then what I've done is I've stacked up all the individual pieces that are the same size and color so that I can make sure that I have everything that I need. The first step is going to be putting together, I'm looking at my instructions here, a white square and 2 green squares. Alright, so I have those 3, I'll put those together, and then underneath those, let me move all these out of the way, kind of build this, you're going to put a white rectangle, and then you're going to have a green, a white, and a green. So I'll stop there, I'll put those together, and you can see what that looks like. Okay, so we put these together, pressed them. You always try to press to the darker fabric so that you don't see as much shadow. Then we take the next, on the picture it shows this one goes to this one, and once you put those together, then you'll connect this one, and one of the big squares. So this is the first row together. Then the next row is going to be 2 of the smaller green ones, and then a larger white one. And then right below that's going to be basically this one as an opposite. So we've sewed this middle row here, and then the last set is we're going to sew this green to this white. Okay, then we're going to sew the green, gray, green, and then we're going to sew the green, gray, green, and press everything. And then we're going to sew these 2 to this one, and this one to that one, and then we'll sew that whole part there. So I'll sew part of it, and I'll just show you step by step. Alright, so I've got all my individual pieces sewn together, and so next we'll put this one right sides together with the big square and sew that, and then we'll do the same thing over here. We'll sew this top one to the middle and this bottom one to the middle, and once that's sewn together, we'll sew that to the next piece there. Alright, so now I have the top put together, and then I'm going to put these little pieces here and here And then the last two pieces, or the long green ones, go across here. So once I have those sewn on, my top will be finished and I'll be ready to quilt it. Okay, so somehow I made a mistake, and I don't know exactly what I did, but I didn't have these long enough to go all the way across. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut, it looks like it's about 1/8 of an inch or so off, so I'm going to just trim that amount off all the way around, and then that way it'll look like I planned it that way. So if you make a mistake, there's always ways to fix it. So I'm going to trim all this and then we'll finish up. Okay, I trimmed off my boo-boo, and you know, we all make mistakes, so the thing is not to stress about the mistakes that you make. So we're going to turn that over so that the wrong side is up. We're going to put the batting in the center of it, and then we're going to take the top and put it right there in the center. So this is what is called a quilt sandwich. And then you can pin it together, whatever you want to do. This particular quilt package, they actually have you doing some hand quilting. So if you look at this, is the little picture that they provide you with, you're going to be quilting very similar to that. So let me get out a needle and thread and show you how to do it. But one thing you can do is, if you don't want to do this by hand, you can quilt this on your sewing machine. There's nothing that says you have to do it like they do it. I'll show you a couple of tricks for floss. You can use however many strands you want. I'm just going to use 2 strands, and embroidery floss comes with 6 strands. So what you want to do is hold on to your floss, and you grab one of the strands and you just pull. And if you notice, see how it looks like it's knotting up underneath my finger? I pulled that one strand out, but then when I do this, my floss is not knotted, so I can then pull out the next one, and it just makes a very easy way to get your floss separated without getting a bunch of knots and tangles. So I've threaded my needle with my 2 strands of floss, and then I'm going to show you a really quick, easy knot to put in the end of your floss. So we're going to take this, here's my needle, we're going to cross this over kind of like a T, and then hold it between your thumb and forefinger. And if you have more of your needle showing, it's a little easier. Then you're going to wind this around once, twice, and then grab it with your needle and forefinger, hold it, your thumb and your forefinger, and then pull the needle. And so as you pull the needle, when you get to the end, it makes a little knot. And it just makes a very easy way to knot your thread. Okay, so I'm going to start out here so that my knot is actually in this area, and then when I put my binding on, the knot will be cut off and covered. So to hand quilt this, you're going to I'm going to start out here and just kind of pick up a little bit of the fabric and the batting. Oops, I got a little. All right, and then you have to just kind of gauge it. You can this first row I didn't mark because I'm going right along the seam line, and so what you want to do is I'd say about every 1/8 of an inch or so, you're going to pick up your fabric and then come back through. Okay, so I'm not the greatest hand quilter, and I'm not really pleased with this, so I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to actually just quilt this one on my sewing machine. This one I've already got finished with the binding and everything. I did that with the floss. I don't know, it looks real kind of primitive but happy, so I'm going to leave that one the way it is, but I'll go ahead and quilt this one on the machine so you can see how that. Okay, so I did some quilting on this, and I did not mark my lines. I just kind of what I call eyeballed it, and so they're not exactly perfect, but to me I think that looks kind of just, you know, like me, so not perfect, but you can mark your lines if you want to make sure that everything's nice and perfectly straight. Now that this is all quilted, I'm going to trim right along the edge here and then put my binding on like this one. So I cut the binding out and I pressed it wrong sides together, and so next we're going to take this and we're going to line it up with the edge of the fabric, and we're going to sew our binding on. So I'm going to sew this on, and when I get to the corner I'm going to show you how to turn a corner. Okay, you're going to sew your 1/4 inch seam, and you're going to stop 1/4 of an inch from the corner and take this out from underneath the sewing machine. What you do next is you're going to fold this on a diagonal here, and you want this to be, this cut edge is going to be lined up with this edge right here. So you've got it folded on the diagonal, then you take and you fold this back over it nice and straight, and your fold is going to be lined up with that cut edge. Once you do that, do you see how this lines up perfectly with my edge here? And then I'm going to sew this. Okay, so I've got all my corners done, and what I did was press this open like this. And so once you've done your corners like this, it makes it really easy to turn this and get that nice mitered corner. And then you can do the same thing in the back. When you turn this over, push that down and see how it makes that nice little miter. So once I've done this, I can press this, and then I would do what's called stitching in the ditch, which is stitching right there where the yellow meets the green. So on my green one, green and blue one, I actually sewed the binding to the back and brought it forward and top stitched it, but I wasn't really crazy about how that looked, so I'm doing this one the opposite way. Okay, so I'm finished, and I did the stitch in the ditch, so you can just barely see it right there. If you look at the back, it just catches the back really nice and neat. So that is one of the Matchbox quilts. Now there's 9 different ones, so you would just make all of them following the instructions, and you know, I kind of gave you some tips on this. I think that will help. So, oh, one more thing I want to show you is to make a cute little coaster out of the pre-printed one, okay? So in your kit, you're going to get extra batting and a fat quarter of white solid. And so let me show you how to put that. So we are going to cut a piece of batting and a piece of this is a Bella Solid, the same size as our piece right here. And then we're going to put the batting on the back of this front piece, and then we're going to put the back on top, and then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch around, all the way around, leaving an opening. So when I leave an opening, what I like to do is I like to start right out here, come in, and then go around, and then when I get to the other side, I'm going to stop right here, and then I'm going to sew out to the edge. So I'll sew that and then show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I started sewing here. I turned the corner here and went around, same thing over here. And what that does is it makes this stronger right here so that when you're turning it, it doesn't rip your fabric. But what it also does is when you turn it in and you get ready to sew that edge down, it makes a smoother transition there. And so what I'm going to do is go and trim each of my corners. Makes those corners stand out straighter when we turn it. So I've turned this right side out, and but my corners are not poked out well, and so I really like to use a tool like this one right here that will allow you to put this inside of here and then poke those corners out nice and crisply. And there's lots of different brands out there and different ones that you can use, but I like this particular one because it just seems like it works really well for me. Alright, so there's my corners, and then next I'm going to press this and then sew that closed. But this is just an alternative way to do your little mug rug. If you don't want to put binding on it, you can do both of them just like this. So I've got this pressed, and then this turned under and pressed, and so then I'll just top stitch all the way around, or you could take a needle and thread and slip stitch that together if you wanted to. Okay, so I just sewed around the edges, and then I just quilted around the little plus signs. I think that turned out pretty cute. So there's the back, front, made another little coaster, and it's a little bit smaller than the other one, but not so much. So that just gives you 2 things to do with your project. So we hope you enjoyed this project, and we want you to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks, and have a great day.